Welcome back to The Cure, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, and today we are going to be talking about the new album from Harlem rapper Skizzy Mars, Free Skizzy Mars. Now, Skizzy Mars came up about 4 or 5 years ago now on the SoundCloud scene. He released his first project, the Red Balloon Project, in 2015, and then released his first full-length album, Alone Together, the year afterwards. Since then, he has been on a bit of a hiatus for personal reasons. He had an EP release, I think, early this year or late last year, but this is his first full-length effort since 2016's Alone Together. Going into this album, I was thinking a lot about whether or not Skizzy's music would age well. I really enjoyed his last album, Alone Together, despite a few gripes I might have had with it. It had a really nice nostalgic vibe across a lot of the different tracks, some really nice features, and really good verses and really catchy hooks from Skizzy throughout. Now, Skizzy's music is kind of a relaxed rap, something that really became popular a few years ago with people like maybe Kyle. A very middle ground level of energy that is calm and collected with some upbeat instrumentals here and there, but some slower songs as well. Definitely not trap rap. These songs are really out there for good vibes, in my opinion, most of them at least. They don't have a ton of lyrical content, and while some do, others are super dry in that regard. But Skizzy is unique in some ways, and I find it difficult to find other artists that are very comparable to him, whether that be his voice, the typical instrumental style that he has on a lot of his songs, and a lot of his hooks are really unique as well, and I think that is a driving force from his last album and this album too. Now, this album is 13 tracks, about 35 minutes long, and my main concern was whether or not Skizzy's music was, like I said, going to age well. And I will say, it has not evolved a ton over the last few years. I think this album is very similar in a lot of ways to music he has released in the past. I was not very impressed at all with the EP he released a few months back, and I saw a lot of very similar issues that I had with some of his older music. One of the largest issues being the lack of any kind of depth in most of the lyrics. If you go back and listen to Alone Together, and it took me a while to catch on to this, the lyrics are talking about, just the lyrical depth of these songs is so shallow. You don't get any deeper than drug use, girls, or sometimes a little bit of introspection, but besides that, themes are identical throughout all of these tracks. But generally speaking, this album is fairly similar to his last release. In fact, I don't know if I like it quite as much. We have some weaker features, some weaker tracks on here as well, although there are some strong ones. I think we definitely have a mixed bag here, so let's get into it. Our first track is Skiz Again, and it is dedicated to God. Skizzy pretty much goes throughout this entire track, praising God, talking about how he has helped him get through all of these trials and tribulations, and that's, definitely a step in the right direction from him compared to some of the lyrical content that we've heard in the past from him, or that we'll unfortunately hear later on this album. There's also a nice little poppy, minimal drum kit. These sounds are not very extreme or expressive in any way, and a lot of the kits on this album are like that, but they certainly serve their purpose as long as they have some other cool instrumentals on top of them. So this first track in particular is one of the most mature on the album. Like I said, it's a step in the right direction for Skizzy, and it's good to hear some more interesting lyrics from him. Take It Back is next. It's a little bit less interesting. It kind of feels like a filler track. The lyrics certainly go back down to that shallow level. The instrumental is a little bit less interesting, but there are some pretty good bars on the verses, and the hook is not half bad once again. No Advice, though, is the next really interesting track, which is led by some really nice staccato strings. They're really the most interesting instrument on this entire track. There's another very minimal drum kit. This song has an awesome hook, really easy to remember, very catchy, easy to get stuck in your head, and adds to the replayability of this track. Unfortunately, the verses are a little bit weaker, less beat from Skizzy, less wordplay from Skizzy. Here and there, he kind of tries to experiment with his flow a little bit, and I respect that, but sometimes it's kind of a miss. Sideways is probably the darkest track on the album. It's immediately much more ominous and intimidating, thanks to this creepy instrumental with a really eerie piano on it. This track is really nice. The first verse really helps it build. Instruments are slowly added, the speed is picked up a little bit along with the volume as well, and Skizzy's verses are long, confident, and collected. Second verse in particular on this track is really hard. Skizzy has a really fast flow on it, really confident bars, rhymed well together, and it's probably my favorite verse on the album. Trippy is up next, and it is a very weak track. It is led by some very cringy, corny lyrics from Skizzy Mars, the epitome of what I was talking about when it comes to these shallow, uneventful lyrics. There's a bar on the hook about giving someone the Heisman stiffy, and if that doesn't sum up the track, I really don't know what does. A lot of the lyrics are in the same ballpark, and there's nothing here that saves this song. Next we have our first feature from 24K, Golden on Bayside, and unfortunately I think this track is pretty annoying as well. The hook is just Bayside, Bayside, Bayside over and over again, and this feature is not very great either. This guy is a little too eccentric for my liking, and just adds to the repetitive annoyingness of this track. I think it just really doesn't fit the bill for me. Maybe some people would consider this hook to be catchy, I'm not sure. It is simple after all, but in my opinion it is just way too far in that direction, and it gets pretty run out by the end of the song. Next up is Demons, one of my favorite tracks on the album. This track is led by some very steampunky polka keys, almost as if we're going on a voyage or something. I don't know if that's a great way of describing the instrumental, but it rides really well, and it's simple, but it has a really great melody to it. It's a very nautical sounding track in a way, although it has Skizzy's typical reverb and other hip-hoppy tones added to it. This song features another super stellar, strong hook from Skizzy, and some of the strongest verses on the album once again from him. They aren't necessarily fast, but their wordplay is much more well thought out. Waist Deep is thankfully a break from these kind of meaningless lyrics, and is a step back towards the first track with a more collected, slower track with lyrics that mean a little bit more to Skizzy. This instrumental has some nice pieces on it with some cool reverb, guitar and keys, and then a pretty sweet bass line as well. Unfortunately, it suffers from a weaker hook. It's harder for Skizzy to make this formula work perfectly on a slower, sadder track like this. It's nice to hear some more serious lyrics from him, but the track is weaker because of that. The next track, Dot Dot Dot, I don't even know where to begin. It's just absolutely terrible. It should have been an immediate cut from the album. It would have certainly made it better in many ways, just not being here. The instrumental sounds like it was made in GarageBand in 15 minutes. The verses and the hook are barely even a thought. They're terribly written, they don't flow well together. This song feels like it is in its very remedial stages, and we're not even near the end product. The real finisher is Afraid with Trevor Daniel, and I have mixed feelings about this song. It is unique, it's certainly more unique of a finisher than Run It Up would have been, but this song feels like kind of the credit track to a movie in the early 2000s or something like that. It is almost a purposefully written nostalgic track, and besides the instrumental, Skizzy and Trevor actually sing together on this track. Skizzy's singing is fairly weak. I don't think the hook is very strong on this. It sounds like something I should be singing in Sunday school, maybe. But not a bad finisher just because of how unique it is. And at that, we have gotten all the way through Free Skizzy Mars. As far as variety goes, we don't have a ton of it. There are some very wheelhouse tracks from Skizzy on this album in his traditional style, and that's the majority of the songs. A couple of them are a little slower, and a couple of them are a lot worse, but I don't think that necessarily means there is variety. Creatively, I think there are some interesting ideas here that maybe differ from what Skizzy used to do in the past, but far and away we see very, very similar music from him here. I don't see too many strong strides in the direction of a transformation as far as his music goes, although maybe he feels a lot different as a person now. Production-wise, I think this thing is really strong. Skizzy always has pretty nice, tight instrumentals with cool instruments, cool sounds, and they're often mixed well too, so I think that is definitely a pro for this album. And we do have 13 tracks, although a couple of them are pretty rough. I think that is a really nice amount of content for an album, assuming all of the songs hold up. So as a final verdict, I do not think this is my favorite project from Skizzy. I think if you want to get into his music, you should go check out Alone Together from a few years prior. I think there are some good tracks on here, but I don't know if Skizzy's style has evolved like maybe he hopes it will, or maybe I was hoping it would either. Like I said, there are some diamonds in the rough here, but his earlier music so far has just impressed me a little bit more. Better features, better instrumentals, catchier verses, and less crappy tracks. But hopefully we keep seeing music from Skizzy. I know he has been on a bit of a hiatus, so I hope we keep getting more and he keeps experimenting and keeps evolving as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your support. Please don't forget to check out this album if you want to check out Skizzy Mars, get into some new music. I still recommend it even if I like his older albums more. And I will catch you guys next week with our next review.